In February 1926, a government decided that millions of marriages were no longer legally valid. There was no war, no election, no public referendum. It was done with a vote in Parliament, and it took effect immediately. This is what happened between the 16th and the 22nd of February, 100 years ago. During this week, in Ankara, the Turkish Grand National Assembly approved a new civil code. It was more than 600 articles long, and it did not amend the existing legal system. It replaced it. For centuries, family life in what is now Turkey had been governed by Islamic law, known as Sharia. Under the Ottoman Empire, Sharia courts handled marriage, divorce, inheritance, and family disputes. Religious authorities, not the state, determined what was legally valid inside the household. That arrangement ended this week. The new civil code abolished Islamic law in almost all areas of civilian life and replaced it with a secular legal system, closely modeled on the Swiss Civil Code. The choice of model was deliberate. The Swiss Civil Code, introduced in 1907, was regarded as one of the most modern and systematic legal frameworks in Europe. By adopting it almost wholesale, the Turkish government was not simply reforming family law, it was aligning the country legally with continental Europe. In effect, the state was signaling that authority would now rest in parliament and civil courts, not in religious institutions. For supporters, this represented progress. For critics, it marked a dramatic break with centuries of Islamic legal tradition. From now on, a marriage in Turkey was only legally recognized if it was registered by the state. A religious ceremony alone no longer had legal standing. For some families, the consequences were immediate. A woman whose marriage had been recognized for years might suddenly find that her legal status depended on paperwork. A man who had entered into more than one marriage under religious law now faced criminal liability. Couples were required to register their relationships retroactively to avoid disputes over property, inheritance, or the status of their children. Polygamy, long permitted under certain conditions, was banned outright. Divorce was removed from religious courts and placed under civil judges. Inheritance law was standardized, regardless of gender. For women, the change was especially significant. They were recognized as legal equals in civil court. They could sign contracts independently. They could choose a profession. They could appear before a judge without a husband or male guardian speaking on their behalf. These reforms were driven by the government of Mustafa Kemal Ataturk, who believed that the new Turkish state could not endure if religious law continued to regulate everyday life. But for those living through it, this was not an abstract debate about secularism. It meant registration offices. It meant new documents. It meant that private life was no longer governed by religious authority alone, but recorded and enforced by the state. In the same week that women in Turkey were gaining legal rights through the authority of the state, two women in Western Europe were exercising freedom in a very different way, in public, in front of thousands. On the 16th of February in Cannes, thousands gathered to watch a tennis match. Suzanne Lenglen, already a global celebrity and six-time Wimbledon champion, faced Helen, younger, quieter, and undefeated in major competition. Lenglen won in straight sets, but the result was only part of the story. Newspapers across Europe and North America covered the match the following day. It was treated not simply as sport, but as spectacle. Two women competing publicly before thousands commanded international attention. Power in this instance was exercised through visibility. In Greece, during this same week, power moved in the opposite direction. Political authority tightened. President Theodoros Pangalos ordered the arrest of 15 opposition figures. They were not charged. They were not tried. They included former prime ministers and senior ministers. They were placed on ships and deported to Anafi, one of the most isolated islands in the Aegean Sea. Anafi had no proper port, limited supplies, and a population small enough that every arrival was noticed. At the same time, civilians were ordered to surrender most firearms. Police were granted expanded powers to search homes and confiscate weapons. In Greece, opposition did not disappear because it lost an argument. It disappeared because it was physically removed from public life. By the third week of February 1926, Power was taking different forms across Europe and the Eastern Mediterranean. In Turkey, it rewrote the structure of private life. In France, it gathered around public figures and spectacle. In Greece, it confined and expelled its critics. For those living through it, this was not yet history. It was paperwork. It was applause. It was arrest. That was the world 100 years ago. Thanks for watching. If you'd like to follow the story week by week, please consider subscribing.